For decades, we have had to put up with the accusation that the Soviets were behind the Katyn Massacre, in which tens of thousands of Polish officers were executed. And it has been repeated ad nauseum that the Soviets were responsible. The Soviets are the most evil people that have ever existed, underhandedly defend the Nazis. And this is something that we are completely hammered with all the time. Now, over the decades, there has been so much controversy around this subject. Information coming out that contradicts other information that's come out. And frankly, I was one of the opinion that this was probably something that we were never going to know the truth about. There are Nazi documents which confirm that the Nazis carried out the massacre. But then later, we found documents from the Soviet Union that says that the Soviets carried out the massacre. So it's really very strange when you have documents from both sides confirming that the massacre happened. Now, these documents on the Soviet side were released by Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin. So that kind of made me suspicious, but, the documents are documents. You can't, really say much. However, the Human Rights Court of the European Union has analyzed the document and come to the conclusion that they are a forgery. The documents that blame the Soviets for the Katyn Massacre that were supplied by Boris Yeltsin and Gorbachev were faked. This shows not only the whole anti-Stalin position of both of those men. I mean, Yeltsin outright being a tool for the United States, and that's known. That's not even in question. And that Gorbachev, in his whole anti-Stalinist campaign that he went on when he became the premier of the Soviet Union, it is now showing the depths of what a dishonest piece of human garbage that Gorbachev was. That these two men put out fake documents to blame their own country for crimes that the Nazis committed. Now think about that. Normally you put out a document to blame somebody else for something that you did, but they did the opposite. These people who professed to love, in the case of Yeltsin, Russia, in the case of Gorbachev, the Soviet Union, they proceeded to slander their own country. For what? Now I can understand why Yeltsin would do it. He's a U.S. puppet. He wanted to destroy the Soviet Union. He wanted to dismantle it. That was his whole plan. That's what he did. His entire leadership was privatize the entire country and force it back to capitalism with an iron fist. But, of course, capitalist revolutions always happen, so peacefully, and everybody agrees, and it's so happy, smiles and sunshine, that anybody who disagrees is awful and evil. But for Gorbachev, for someone who supported the Soviet Union, who wanted to be the leader of it, and actually did like the Soviet Union, and fought as one of the heroes of World War II to defend it, to turn around and do something so defamatory to his own country. Now, I can understand why he'd want to demonize Stalin. He wanted to get rid of Stalin's policies. Okay, so I can understand that. But to do that to your own country, the one you support, the aspects of it you support, in order to carry that out, it's almost mind-boggling to me. What a monumental piece of human shit that he is, that he would have to be in order to do that. Now, here's another aspect I think we should keep in mind. Think about for how long it's been yelled at us, Katyn Massacre, Katyn Massacre. And that has been thrown at us just insanely, as if somehow it was relevant. But look at this. Now we know it's fake. Now we know that blaming the Soviet Union is wrong. It was actually the Nazis, and the documents that were intended to prove the Soviets did it were faked. And they weren't claimed to be faked by Russians. They weren't claimed to be faked by Soviets. They were done by the European courts themselves. That they were fabricated. But I guarantee you that despite the fact that we have now proven those documents to be forgeries, they will continue to attack us with this whole, the Soviets were behind the Katyn Massacre. It doesn't matter how much you prove them wrong. Pro-capitalist people, right-wingers, and God knows a ton of liberals will still continue to push that falsehood. They will continue to claim it no matter what. It will always be that way because there is no honesty out of them whatsoever. And I think this ties into a good deal of how debate is carried out in the world today. And I'm not even limiting it to just the internet. Think back to the debate I had with Sargon of Akkad over socialism. It got to the point where essentially he threw everything he could at me and nothing would work. I hit it all out of the park. And then at the end, he said socialism was somehow inevitable. Now, despite the fact that a lot of the things that he claimed about Marxism ended up not being true, and I proved that they were not true, I guarantee you, 2 days later, he continued to repeat those same falsehoods. Because he's ideologically motivated to do so. But this is by no means limited to him. This is almost all debate that takes place all the time. Think back to the debate I had on China. I won that debate. I think that's pretty clear. China is not a socialist country. It's capitalist, and I put forth a substantial, concrete, conclusive argument that it is capitalist. But people who think that China is socialist will continue to do so. It doesn't matter how much you prove them wrong, they will continue to believe that it is, because they need to believe that it is. There is an aspect of first worldism that refuses to accept how bad the state of socialism is today. What very little revolutionary movements are left are dying off. The FARC is basically gone. The Filipino Revolution is on the verge of defeat. They have never been smaller. Other revolutionary movements are outright gone. The Naxalites inside of India are shrinking daily. They've had a little bit of a resurgence thanks to the incompetence of Modi, but in general, they're shrinking. All across the world, socialist forces are losing. Revolutionary potential has never been at a worse time. And that's absolutely true. At other periods in time, there were revolutions going on, or the victories of them had been proceeding. But now we're sitting here with nothing. And then we've got people running around claiming that, Americans are discussing socialism for the first time in history in a real serious way. And I'm left only to say, what are you talking about? The thing that's being passed off as socialism is not socialism at all. It's Bernie Sanders' free stuffism. It's, universal healthcare. That's socialism. So we get universal healthcare. We're socialists now. That's not socialism. Absolutely not. That's an aspect that socialism should do, but that doesn't make a country socialist. And you've got all these people running around, Cortez is going to make us socialist. We can push the Democratic Party more into socialism, and then we're going to get it, because that worked every time that has been tried, right? My point is that these things are not socialist, but they're being passed off as. I mean, come on, right-wingers know that Bernie Sanders really isn't a socialist. They say that as a hate thing. They say that as a thing to scare people. But liberals are outright claiming this and literally believing it, that someone who just advocates social democratic Western European-style reforms are somehow socialism. It's class struggle. No, it's not. It's a preservation of capitalism. Even people, running around protecting the reputation of FDR, saying, look at his second Bill of Rights he wanted to do, blah, blah, blah. Did that stop him from committing any of the crimes that he did? Why didn't he put these things through when he was president? Why did he wait until the end? He knew these weren't going to go through. He had to know that the next guy was just going to come along and kibosh the whole thing. That's absolute nonsense. FDR was as much of a fucking war criminal as about every other president in U.S. history. He was as much of much of a bourgeois dictatorship as any of the other ones were. Now, what is this nonsense? Because that's a problem with first worldism. They want to believe. They can't accept how bad things are. So now they're going to go around redefining Bernie Sanders or FDR for some insane reason as somehow being socialist or socialistic-y. None of this is true. Because all of this has to do with avoiding actually doing a revolution. And that's the stance that us as third worldists have been taking for this entire time. First world people don't want to do it. What limited potential there actually is in the first world is statistically insignificant. The general population does not want a revolution. They don't want a whole new system. They're not arguing to tear down the whole crooked, capitalist apparatus, going right down radical, go right down to the roots and dig the whole thing out, get rid of it, and replace it with a whole new system. They just want to trim the branches. Those excesses that capitalism do, the thing that makes capitalism what it is, the banker that goes too far with gambling, the company that goes too far with greed and appropriating and trying to get too great a profit that hinders people from getting necessary health care and other services that they need. Oh, we just need to trim that, and then it'll be okay. And that's the real mentality that exists in the first world, and this is best exemplified in the United States. For a country that was born out of a revolution, as questionable as it might have been, it's amazing how much that revolutionary spirit just doesn't exist. I mean, you can get more revolutionary potential going to right-wing nutbags, like the three percenters, the Alex Jones type, the, herder, I'm a sovereign citizen, the Constitution doesn't apply to me, also, where's my constitutional rights, kind of thing. And there's more revolutionary potential out of these nutbags, or the Oath Keepers, people like them, than there are out of any leftists. I mean, it's almost safe to say that leftism is dead in the United States, and all that's left is a bunch of liberals trying to pass themselves off as leftists, trying to pass themselves off as radicals. Look at the propensity for identity politics. They can't even understand some of the most basic concepts. A lot of them claim the mantle of the Black Panthers. And the Black Panthers weren't anti-white. They were anti-racism. But these people who are claiming to be the successors of the Black Panthers are running up screaming, oh my God, white people this, haha, spicy food, you can't handle it, yeah. And all this like nonsense. How is that revolution? How are you going to build a revolutionary proletariat by insulting 60% of the population? I mean, it's stupid. I'd like the same people who run around calling trans people revolutionary. And they're going to organize the trans people for revolution against the cis. That's great. You're going to organize 0.1% of the population to go against the other 99.9% of the population. I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. One of the I'm often reminded of the thing that Lenin said to reach the lower and deeper sections of the proletariat. It seems like they just didn't want to do that. Instead, rather than really acknowledge the way things are in the first world, they just want to look for something in the first world that they can champion to turn around and say, oh, look, here's the revolution. We found the 2% of the population that's Native American, of course, implying the entirety of the Native American population is revolutionary. Trans people, which are statistically insignificant in terms of revolutionary potential. And these other groups, like even things too insane, like, oh, autistic people are revolutionary because they're oppressed by society. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's nonsense. They're literally doing anything but class. And yet they continue to stand there and talk about being a part or supporting proletarian revolution. I think it's pretty obvious by now that the revolutionary classes are not in the first world. Look at everybody who runs around with these ideas and how they're so completely out of touch. Now, I support African liberation, the liberation of Africa from colonialism, imperialism, etc. But some of these Pan-Africanists in the United States, or relatively in the first world, these college activists who have generally no connection to the real world whatsoever, they really believe that all black people are one unified race. Well, that's not true. I mean, I hate to break it to a lot of these people. I mean, there's some who realize that it's not true, but there's a great deal that don't. First world black people benefit from imperialism as well. They really do. They use the same roads that we do. They use the same social services. And in fact, in some cases, due to the poverty in the first world, they use more of the social services available. And these are bought with the exploitation of the third world, which largely includes Africa. So to say that a black person in the first world and the black person in the first world are somehow in the same class is simply wrong. Even when you go to Africa, Africa is very divided among the black population itself. It seems like everybody hates Nigeria. I'm not really sure why, but it just seems like every African country just hates Nigeria for some reason. Now, I do believe in a Pan-Africanism, a unity of all the African states against imperialism and colonialism. But to simply just claim them to be one people with one culture, with one language, is false. They're not. There's very unique differences between the individual African countries. They don't have the same culture and language. They don't have the same customs or even ideas about governance, etc. So this idea that a lot of people have, and a lot of these, a lot of the people that do think this are white, they are running around thinking that, oh, Black Lives Matter is like totally the same thing as anti-colonial struggles in the third world, which is laughable. Laughable. Because nobody wants to accept the fact of how things really are. And I've gone on a tangent that is so far off the original topic that I don't even remember where I was. So, TLDR, we didn't do the Katyn Massacre, it was the Nazis. And for the past several decades, since these quote-unquote documents came out, they've been lying. We're not responsible. It's about time the Nazis apologize for what they were doing and stop their slander. But of course, they're not going to do that. Even when you prove them wrong, they just continue to do so. Anyway, same thing goes for hardcore right-wingers, liberals, conservatives, too. They're going to continue this kind of dishonesty just to slander the Soviet Union because they're afraid of real change. They're afraid of an equal world. So, yeah, you know what? Let that whole be another speech that I hadn't even actually intended to do, but something that needed to be said anyway. So, you know what? Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.